The sea once sang their praises, now it whispers warnings in their name. They were queens beneath the waves, beautiful, powerful, and adored by all. But sometimes, even the most loved forget where love ends, and pride begins. No one remembers when it changed, only that it did, and that they didn't listen. Now, let me tell you their story.
You're watching our KO Tales. Subscribe and join the family.
Long ago, before rivers were feared, they were loved. Back when the wind still carried stories, and trees whispered truth into the ears of those who listened, the waters of Nneochie ran clear and deep, cradling both fish and fate in her current. And none were more loved than the three mermaid sisters who called her home. They were known as the daughters of blessing. Nneochie, the eldest, wise and just, with eyes like polished amber. She held the memory of the river in her heart, and the voice of judgment in her mouth. Nneochie, gentle and graceful, her songs could quiet storms. Her presence brought peace. Even the birds flew lower when she sang. And Nneochie, the youngest, playful, curious, with a heart that beat a little too fast and eyes that lingered too long on the world of humans. They were not just queens of the deep. They were protectors of life. When the rains failed, they stirred the clouds. When children fell ill, they bathed them in healing light. When fishermen lost their way, they lit the path home with songs from the waves. And in return the people gave thanks, not with fear, but with joy. Each new moon, the villagers would gather by the riverbank. Old men would play drums carved from sacred trees. Mothers would sing lullabies once taught by their own mothers. Children would laugh and chase fireflies, while baskets of fruits, beads, and woven cloth were laid gently on the shoreline. And when the water shimmered and the sisters rose with grace and laughter, the land would hold its breath, because the daughters came not as gods, but as family. They watched children grow, blessed wombs with fertility, protected mothers from restless spirits who wandered too close. And for many, many years, the land and the water lived as one. Peace like a reed bent with the seasons but never broke, until something slithered into the deep. Something old, something forgotten, something that remembered. It came quietly at first, a chill in the water, a silence where fish once danced, a tremor in the shells that lined the underwater palace. The sisters felt it. Nneochie in her bones, Nneochie in her breath, and Nneochie in her dreams. Something had awakened, and it would not be content with silence. It came in silence, a great serpent spirit from the trench, older than the river itself, older than song, older than the gods the villagers feared. No storm marked its coming. No ripple disturbed the sacred waters. Only Nneochie knew. She was the youngest of the three daughters of blessing, playful, passionate, filled with fire that no ocean could cool. And that night, as moonlight danced on her skin, she spun alone in the shallows, laughter echoing like bells through the trees. Above the water, the villagers had left their offerings, baskets of fruits, whispered prayers, humble songs. But Nneochie's heart beat with a hunger those offerings could not satisfy. And that's when it came. The serpent did not hiss. It whispered, its voice smooth as river stone, ancient as thunder buried in bone. "You are too great to serve these mortals," it said. "They take and take, your beauty, your grace, your power, and they return nothing of worth. Scraps, rituals, empty praise. Where is the throne they promised you? Don't you want more, Nneochie? More respect? More power?" Nneochie trembled. Not from fear, no, not her. From recognition. Somewhere deep inside, that voice echoed something she already believed. Something she had buried beneath duty and sisterhood. But still she said no. He turned away. And the next night, it came again. And again. Soft as silk. Sweet as honey. Sharp as a blade. The serpent spun tales of empires, showed her visions of oceans on fire in her name. And slowly her no began to bend. On the seventh night, Nneochie stood before her sisters, no longer wide-eyed and wondering. "Why should we settle for songs and fruits," she said, her voice steady, "when we deserve gold? when we deserve to rule the waters and the land beyond it. Oleato, the eldest, felt something shift in her bones. She had seen Chima's joy turn into a quiet storm. She had watched her sister's laughter grow sharp. "What are you saying?" Oleato asked, folding her hands over her heart. "We were chosen to protect balance, not demand tribute." Kalika flinched. She hated conflict, but she stepped forward. "Chima, that voice you've been hearing, it feels wrong. It feels like cold stone and broken things." But Chima only smiled, as if she knew something they didn't. "It only feels wrong," she whispered, "because you still believe the lie." Still they refused her. First. But temptation does not knock once. Comes in waves. Comes as a whisper. Studies you first. It finds the cracks in your heart. And then it speaks. Oleato, the eldest, had always been the strong one. She carried the weight of their destiny like armor. She was the judge when they disagreed, the shield when danger came. But strength has a price. While the others rested, she stayed awake, watching, worrying. When the villagers sang their songs, it was Chima they praised. When they brought offerings, it was Nkolika's healing they sought. But Oleato, they feared her, respected her, but never truly saw her. And so, one night as she sat alone beneath the waterfall, her reflection began to shift. It wasn't her face in the water anymore. It was her older, tired, alone, forgotten. Then came the whisper. "You lead and they follow, but only so they know who to blame. You are their strength, but never their joy. Why carry the burden, Oleato, when you could carry a crown?" She clenched her fists. She wanted to scream. Instead, she closed her eyes and stayed quiet. Kalika was gentle. She was the heart of the three, the one who soothed pain and stitched the river's wounds. She believed that love could fix anything. Until it didn't. One day, a woman came running to the river, carrying a baby with no breath. Nkolika tried everything, songs, tears, old magic, but it was too late. The mother fell to her knees and screamed, "Why have the gods abandoned us?" Little did they know that the serpent killed the child and stopped Nkolika magic from the healing the child, just bring a rift between her and the humans. That night, Nkolika wept alone under a weeping willow. And the whisper came, soft and sharp. "You pour yourself out for them, and still it's never enough. But what if you had more power? The kind that didn't beg, but commanded. Wouldn't you save more lives then?" She shook her head, trembling. But the question stayed. Chima was the youngest, the brightest, the wildest. She danced for the moon and made dolphins follow her just to hear her laugh. But what no one saw was her loneliness. To the villagers, she was a goddess of beauty. To her sisters, a playful child. But no one took her seriously. They loved her light but never her thoughts. They adored her face, not her mind. So when the serpent whispered, "They call you pretty, but they do not listen to you. They cheer when you twirl, but ignore when you speak. You were made for more than ornaments and empty praise." It struck something deep and raw. Chima didn't say yes immediately, but she stopped saying no. The serpent didn't stop. The serpent waited. Then it came again. Oleato stood alone, watching Chima disappear into the waters night after night. "She's slipping away," the voice murmured. "And when she rises in power, do you think she'll still need you?" Oleato's stomach twisted. The next day, Nkolika watched a child fall ill despite her efforts. "You keep patching holes in a dam that will burst," the voice said. "But if you ruled it, you could rebuild the whole river." Chima floated in the moonlight, eyes burning with ambition. "They still hold you back," the serpent said. "Even now they hesitate. But you see the truth." And this time Chima nodded. One night, they gathered at the sacred circle of shells. Chima's voice cut through the silence. "We have served and served. And for what? They praise us when it suits them. They worship us when they're afraid. But never do they treat us as equals. We are not their servants. We are not their saviors. We are daughters of magic. born of spirit and salt. We are gods. Kalika looked down. Her hands trembled. Oleido said nothing. But her silence was no longer firm. It was uncertain. Think of how much more we could do, Chima said, stepping closer. If we stopped begging for love, and started taking what is rightfully ours. Long pause. And in that silence, Oleido closed her eyes. Nkalika took a breath that sounded too much like surrender. And so, the serpent's whispers rooted themselves like vines around their hearts. The daughters of blessing began to change. Not all at once, but slowly. And once the river spirits fall, nothing is ever the same. The sisters changed. Once, their laughter echoed like wind chimes across the water, soft, warm, and full of grace. Once, their eyes held the kindness of rain. But now, that kindness was gone. Where once they accepted fruits with smiles, they now demanded silver. Heavy, gleaming silver, as though the sweetness of mangoes and the ripeness of yams had become unworthy of divine taste. Where once they knelt beside the sick, hands glowing with healing light, whispering hope into broken bodies, they now folded their arms and asked, "What will you offer me in return?" Where once they shielded the village from drought, plague, and restless spirits, they began to punish, and they punished without mercy. If a family brought a dry basket, no yams, no oil, no silver, they returned to find their hut soaked in water, fish bones floating in their cooking pots, the roof dripping with spite. If a child forgot to kneel, too young to know reverence, too innocent to fear, their father's crops would wither by dawn, curling into ash with no explanation. And when a grieving widow came to the riverbank, her body shaking, her hands empty, her only offering the tears streaming down her face, the sisters mocked her sorrow. One flicked her wrist. The widow's tears turned to salt midstream, stinging her cheeks, drying her throat, and they cast her away like she was filth in their waters. The villagers, once joyful worshippers, grew quiet. Festivals were shorter. Songs were sung with caution, never too loud. Children were warned never to speak the sisters' names without bowing. Offerings became heavier, more desperate. Fear gripped the hearts of every mother and father. But worse than fear came the hunger in the sisters' eyes. They began to enjoy it. The way the villagers trembled. The way they crawled. Power. The reverence. The desperation. They wore it like a new skin. Even their laughter changed. Once a balm, now it chilled the blood. Cold, echoing through the night like distant thunder. And so love gave way to dread. Blessings became bargains. And the sacred waters of Nneochie grew dark. The river grew darker. Its once clear currents, where sunlight danced and laughter echoed, thickened like old blood. The song of the water spirits, once gentle and joyous, turned to murmurs, low, haunting whispers that curled around roots and rocks like warnings no one wanted to hear. The old spirit of the fig tree, whose roots drank from the oldest stream, wept as its leaves browned out of season. You were chosen to protect, not to be worshipped. It cried, its bark splitting with sorrow. A turtle spirit, older than the soil itself, dragged its ancient shell onto the riverbank and spoke with a voice like crumbling stone. You eat the offerings of the living, but forget the hunger of the river. It will not starve quietly. But the sisters laughed. Oleido, the eldest, whose wisdom once calmed storms, now carved a throne from the bones of drowned warriors. She crowned herself with a halo of polished skulls and declared judgment in the name of the river, but no longer in its spirit. Nkalika, ever the gentle one, twisted her grace into vanity. She enchanted her mirror not to reflect truth but to show only what she desired. Adoration, obedience, beauty eternal. In its glass, even tears turned to jewels. And Chima, the youngest, once the purest of heart, opened her arms to the forbidden. She whispered to the shadows beneath the waves, and they answered. She did not just call the serpent. She welcomed it. She fed it. She built its lair beneath the sacred temple with stones soaked in blood and silence. The sea grew quiet. The fish stopped swimming near, sensing the curse in the currents. The birds circled but never landed. Their songs swallowed mid-air. Even the moon, once a silver companion in the sisters' reflections, turned her face away. Now the water shimmered only with gloom. Still the sisters did not listen. They laughed louder, took more, demanded reverence like gods and punished doubt like traitors. But the river was ancient, older than memory, older than their names. And though it had been patient, it had not forgotten. The stones beneath the temple began to shift. The roots of the fig tree twisted in pain. The winds carried silence where once they carried praise. Because the river had begun to get upset listening to the cries of the villagers. One night, the villagers gathered with their final offering, not out of love but out of desperation. Child was dying. They begged, pleaded, but the sisters wanted more. "Your tears are not enough," said Oloido. "Bring us coral and rubies," said Nneochie. "Or let the child join the river," said Chima. The villagers left in silence. That same night, the river rose on its own. The temple cracked. The throne shattered. The serpent turned on Chima. "You were never royalty, only useful." It swallowed her whole. Nneochie, terrified, ran to her mirror, but it showed only her true face. Greedy, hollow, forgotten. She faded into the glass, never seen again. Oloido stood at the bank alone. The children she once protected now avoided the river. The fish she once summoned now feared her name. She cried to the spirits, "I was the eldest. I only followed to protect them." But the river had already made its judgment. Storm came and took her crown. Years passed. Everything came back to normal. The villagers decided not to have anything to do with any water spirit. Instead they chose a king among themselves. It is said that sometimes beneath the moonlight, if you listen closely, you'll hear three voices calling, not in power, but in regret. A protector who forgets their duty becomes a curse. Greed will silence even the greatest of gifts. And when the river warns you, you must listen, or be remembered only as a lesson.